this movement that I started is called From Hate to Understanding. It's not about becoming a Muslim. I did, but that's a whole other story, actually. But it's about understanding people.
Welcome to Sacred Rebel Voices. My name is Jerry Zaire, and I'm glad to have my friend Richard McKinney. Salam alaikum, my friend.
Wa alaikum assalam. How are you?
It's good, and good to have you here. You know, Mac, his story is just such a profound story of transformation and hospitality, how he changed. And, you know, Mac and I have talked, and I think people will appreciate your story, Mac, because, you know, you began as a Marine, and like many people in the United States, you were a young man. Tell me what age you were when this picture of you as a Marine.
I was 18.
And, you know, you went into the service, and, you know, your experience, when you left the Marines, you were a different man, weren't you, coming out of that?
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about that change and what happened to you. You were over in Afghanistan and kind of that whole experience.
So, well, my military career is kind of a twisted one. I joined the Marine Corps, but I retired from the Army. I still claim the Marine Corps. As a matter of fact, I have a Marine Corps license plate on my car. But I did retire from the Army, and I was in 3 official combat areas in the Marine Corps, and officially 2 combat areas in the Army.
Okay. Now, so when you were over there, you know, and we talked about how you're just conditioned to see other people who were over in Afghanistan, the enemy, and conditioned not to see them really as human beings. Talk a little bit about that.
So when you're in the military, or, you know, something like that, I imagine you're not taught. This is a skill you pick up because they don't really have time to teach these kind of things, but it's how you deal with the fact that you may or you have taken another human life, because human beings are just not made that way. You know, it's a whole breakdown of our psychological profile. We are not made to take lives. We're just not made that way. That's why military boot camps are so severe, and the training afterwards is so severe, because they install that switch. The problem with me, after 25 years and 5 official combat tours, the switch was stuck in the on position. I didn't know how to turn it off. To be honest with you, I was afraid to turn it off because I didn't know how to act otherwise.
And so you come out of the military, and, you know, you come back to Muncie, Indiana. And was that where you were from, or how did you end up coming to Muncie?
So I had broken service between the Marine Corps and the Army for 2 years. And I couldn't get a job. I mean, I was in Somalia in 1993. President Bush came over to visit the troops. I don't know if you remember that. He just lost the election to Clinton, and he came over to visit the troops. He's a vet himself, right? Or was a vet. And I was one of the ones that was picked to be his bodyguard, which is really a fabulous term for bullet catcher.
All right.
But it didn't matter. It didn't matter. And I found myself, because I didn't have any job skills, all I had was a GED. And I found myself as a laborer for a commercial roofing company. Now, you know, anybody knows anything about that field, that's a very, very hard working field. I mean, that's Yeah. You know, you've been to work when the day is done doing that job. And I was being treated like just dirt by the supervisor, and just, I mean, I had enough. I said, man, I'm better than this. I was a presidential bodyguard 2 years ago. I walked right off the job site and into the Army recruiter's office. Said, when's the bus leave? So, and I didn't know how to act in civilian world. It's a wonder, if I would have stayed out any longer, I probably would have ended up in prison. I didn't know how to act. So
when you say you didn't know how to act, because you were angry, you were broken, you were hurt, or what?
Well, so I had served like 8 years in the Marine Corps initially, and got out after my second tour in Somalia. Okay. Anybody knows anything about Somalia? That was a very confusing place. Let's just put it that way. And when I decided, I made the conscious decision that I need to try this civilian thing, because right now I'm 25 years old. At the time, I was a 3-time combat vet officially, and I was kind of getting ate up in the head. I mean, to put it in street terms, and I decided that I needed to get out, so I got out.
How did you end up, though, getting into Muncie? And this was such a pivotal point in your life, but that the movie, The Stranger at the Gate, the documentary about that, is this wonderful story. But bring us back to what you were feeling and how you come into Muncie, Indiana.
So with Muncie, I was living in Southern California, and I was trying to get this professional pro card for my kickboxing, but I ended up losing a fight. I got the fight, I lost the fight, and I ended up staying. So it became, once I went into the Army, it just became my home of record.
What was it? You see the Muslims there? You see this mosque? What's going on inside you? And I realized, you've made such a transformation from that person. So it's hard even maybe to reconnect to that. But if you can help us understand what were you feeling in there, and what was going on inside of that person?
So initially, I didn't even give Muslims a second thought, right? Until after I went back overseas and was facing them downrange. It was when I came back, when I was going through my holding pattern, being medically retired after 25 years, because I got caught up in an explosion in Iraq, and it kind of messed me up physically. And that's when I noticed that, they were there. They were there the whole time. It was just, I never, excuse me, I never noticed it because it didn't mean anything to me. But now I was surrounded by these people, and it made me very uncomfortable. And I knew what their intentions were. I knew
when you knew their intentions. What did you think their intentions were?
It was basically to subjugate all of us that were not of them.
And of course, it wasn't true, was it?
No.
Right.
Not
but
even.
That's what you were conditioned. And many people, I think, who don't know Muslims or Islam probably still think that. We're kind of conditioned in that way, aren't we?
Sure. Yeah. It's kind of like the common enemy, I guess. It's like, and it's so this movement that I started is called From Hate to Understanding. It's not about becoming a Muslim. I did, but that's a whole other story, actually. But it's about understanding people. And see, I was ignorant, and a lot of citizens in America are ignorant of what it is. They're told what it is. Well, that doesn't work, man. I was drinking that Kool-Aid too.
And what was that Kool-Aid? And what was the Kool-Aid?
It was hate. Plain and simple. It was hate.
Mm-hmm.
And the military didn't make me hate. I want to be clear about that. Military, I've been asked about that several times. And the military, it has come up as like, about the military instilling hatred in you. The military does not instill hatred in anybody. It acts as a conduit sometimes, right? But they don't have time to make you hate people. All right. We got stuff to do. Okay. They don't make us hate, but it was easy for me knowing that because of my actions, somebody's not going home tonight. And it made it so I could live with that until I couldn't.
So you're there and you decide that you're going to bomb. Help me see if I'm correct about this, that you were going to bomb this Muslim center. Was that right?
Yes.
And so, you're filled with hate at this point. Was that true?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was a plan of about 3 years.
Okay.
Now I took my time and I did the recon. And at first I located what was the Islamic Center, but at that time it was in a neighborhood right off of campus, right off of Ball State University, right? It was down one of the streets there. I think it was Ball Avenue. And I was like, too much collateral damage. I can't do this, man. I can't justify this. There's too many Americans that might come and be harmed by this. So it doesn't equate. But then they moved. And again, Recon finished the bomb, was waiting for Ramadan that year. And I was gonna detonate it on Friday during Ramadan, because they're all there on Friday Ramadan, okay? For Jumu'ah prayer, for their Friday service. Everybody's there. You got people in the hallways praying. It's kind of like Christmas Mass for the Catholics. You might not see them the rest of the year, but they'll be there at Christmas Mass, right? It's a little joke I make, but yeah, it's kind of like that, right? And so that's what I was waiting on.
So you go and somehow, what happened there? That you had this encounter with, I don't think it was Bibi. Was it Bibi's husband, or what? Yeah. What happened though that changed who you were in that?
Well, first and foremost, when I walked in, there was a African American Muslim there, an older gentleman. Actually, he played pro basketball back in the 70s. I didn't know that until he was passing. But he was there. We were the only ones there. Being military, I couldn't help but get there early. And I walk in and he sees me and I see him, and he knew I was out of place. And he says, what can I do for you? And I said, I want you to teach me about Islam. Because what I was searching for, because I knew how this was going to play out. I knew I was not getting away with this. I knew I would end up in federal prison. I knew I would end up with a needle in my arm. Right? Because that's the law. Didn't matter, because I knew, regardless of the law, in my heart, I felt I was doing the right thing. So I was willing to sacrifice that. I didn't really care. And I went there to look for the proof, the tangible, physical proof that I needed for my day in court. And long story short, I ended up finding something totally different out about the religion.
Well, and I think that's part of this, isn't it? Because we don't know people of other faiths. We just hear about these people, and we're kind of ignorant, really, whether it's people who are Sikhs or people who are Hindus or Jews or anything. And so here you were, though. So first, this guy gives you this kind of, invitation, but there was something else that happened. Wasn't there just a sense of, what was it? The hospitality or something changed in you? What happened in that way?
So what really struck me is that as I'm there, as a visitor, as a non-Muslim, everybody was friendly. Everybody welcomed me, wanted to talk to me, right? Not to like, hey, Islam's it, man. You need to come over to our side, right? It wasn't anything like that. It was just getting to know people. It was this conversation. Everybody wanted to talk, and everybody was so friendly. I remember BB's husband. I was sitting in the library talking to another gentleman closer to my own age, and BB's husband doesn't know me from nothing. He comes in, he sits on the floor. I was on a couch, so he sits on the floor and hugs my leg and starts to cry, talking about the beauty of Islam. And I'm like, what is going on here? Now, I already knew that the culture, there is no space. There is no safe space, right? There's, I don't know how they all got through COVID, because they got to be right up on you. All right. But as Americans, we're not like that. We're like arm's distance, right? You can talk to me from there. Okay. He just hugged my leg. Don't know me from anybody. And I was like, man, it didn't mean too much at the moment, but it stuck with me. Right. And, I'm thinking, if this guy only knew, because when I went in there, I said, I went in there as somebody just wanted to learn a little bit more about Islam, which wasn't a lie. Just wasn't the full truth. Okay. And I got handed a Quran, and they said, take this home, read it, come back when you got questions. Man, I dove into that book because I was amazed. I was like, yes, they just handed me the holy grail of evil, and they're going to explain it to me. Oh man, this is great, right? So I'm reading. And there's some things kind of like the Old Testament. The Old Testament is pretty rough, in the Bible, and so I come across these things in the Quran, and I'm like, okay, explain this one to me. So they'd explain it. And I was like, oh, that sounds good. Okay. But I didn't take their word for gospel. I went back and then I researched this. I was like it's funny because I've never been called an intelligent person, but it was like I was a scholar diving into this, researching, right? Watching videos, both good and bad. They had the ugly videos on YouTube back then, right? And watching all of this stuff and listening to these scholars on both sides, ministers, and what they were saying. And then as time goes on, it finally hits me. Whoa, these people that are anti-Islam, that are speaking out against Islam, they're trying to validate their feelings through hatred. Well, you can't do that. If you use an emotion like that, you invalidate the point you're trying to make, right? You just can't do that. So I started looking more into it, and then I got towards the end of the Quran, and there's a surah, which is a chapter, very short though, very short. And it's called al-Kafirun, which means the non-believer. And what it talks about is you're face to face with the non-believer. And basically you're telling them, I will never believe the way you believe. You will never believe the way I believe. You go your way, I go mine. That's coexistence, is what that is. And I was like, wow, wait a minute, man. I was completely wrong about this. And then I had this crazy dream, and one thing led to another. And
Well, I want to go back to what, as you said, when they, in your mind, they were the evil one, and how much the media affects us, how that gets ingrained in us, that we see people, and I always tell people when they talk about ISIS and they correlate it to all of Islam, and I'll say, ISIS killed more Muslims than they did Christians.
Yeah.
And ISIS is like 10,000 and there's 1.6 billion Muslims in the world.
Exactly. There was a study that was done years ago. It said there was 0.0018 of a percentage that were classified as extremists out of the over 1 billion, almost 2 billion. So you can't demonize a whole group because of the actions of a few. Now, granted, when I was there, it was more than a few, but on the grand scale, it's really not that many. And to look at something because of the actions of a few, but we've kind of done that as a country. We've done that, right? Look at the internment camps we had during World War II. Look at, slavery. I mean, and then after slavery was abolished, look at the way, African Americans were treated. We've always done that. I was on a podcast about a year ago, and I had talked about how this country's always had somebody to hate. Always. If you look at our history, always hated somebody. And it's a social disease. Hatred is a social disease.
So come back to that time when here you are full of hatred. Now you have this guy, hugging your leg. I mean, any of us would be thrown off a little bit, but once you meet BB's husband, he's so loving and warm. I mean, BB, and you meet BB, and you meet these people who were welcoming you. Yeah, and here's a great picture of that. That's you, and is that the African American who you were talking about there?
No, that was the one who gave me the Quran. Actually, his name is Jomo. He lives in Tennessee now. Actually,
okay.
I went down and spoke at his mosque a few months ago. Yeah.
So, so here you were, and was it their hospitality? Was it their spirit of love? Something happened inside of you. Was there a healing happening, or what was going on?
I think that what it was I was getting to see that all of humanity wasn't lost when I considered it was, right? And I'm like, this little pocket here in Muncie, Indiana, you say Muncie, Indiana, some people don't even know where that is, right? Right. And I mean, here it is, this Afghani family, has been here, over 25, 30 years, and they have done nothing but try to make the community better, not just for Muslims, but just for everybody in general. So it's kind of like we're taught in Islam, right? Is that if only the true believer is the one who wants for his neighbor what he wants for himself. And so if you don't have that mindset, if you're full of greed and the drive to get ahead, you're not a true believer. And that's not me saying that. That's actually the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said that, right? So I'm seeing this. Because they don't just talk the talk. I mean, BB, oh my gosh. Well, BB, she walks that walk.
Well, people are generous, and there's always people who say they're Christians and they don't live it out, and that gives people say, oh well, all Christians are like this, or all these people. Yes, there are, but at the core of most people who I've gotten to know who are Muslim, most people who are Christian, these people have salt of the earth. People are heart. Most people are Jewish. They want peace and they want to get along. They want the world to be in a place of harmony. And because the media captures the extreme, it perpetuates, I think, that hatred that you're talking about.
Yes, it does. And like you brought up the media, and one thing I was putting together some thoughts, and I was going to call out CNN and Fox News and both call them government agents, because the news is, it's not what they show as false necessarily. They don't tell the whole story so that we can understand it. And that's where the problem lies. They give us just enough. They shock us with this horrible thing, right? And then, then they take it away, and that's what we're left with. That's the image of what we're left with. We're left with women getting stoned. And do you know, according to Sharia law, there has never been a legitimate stoning in all of Islamic history. Has it happened? Yes. Was it legitimate under Sharia law? No.
Right. And again, I think that's part of what that many of us, again, we see, women in certain cultures who are being oppressed, and we correlate that with the Quran rather than the culture. Because in the Quran, women are well respected, are valued, I know. And so, again, that's some of what, people spew those things that they don't know anything about, which is what I'd love to hear. So once you got to know about Islam, what is it that you think are so similar to the teachings of Jesus that you found in the Quran, that there was a lot of parallels, that Muhammad, peace be upon him, in fact, his cousin was a Christian. And as he, I think this is right, that as he had these dreams, God was giving him this vision to go and share, this to the nomadic tribes. She actually said, you need to listen, you need to honor that, right?
Right. So
share with me some of that, of what you now found and you appreciated and really found connecting you in the Islamic faith.
So what I found is that, Jesus, peace be upon him, was, of course, in Islam, he is a very powerful prophet, right? He came with a message, and he was dead on it about how to treat people, how to act in public, how to love. And he was very nonviolent, extremely, right? But then he was gone, and now we move on to Muhammad, peace be upon him, comes into play. He has this vision given to him by the angel Gabriel from God, right? And he picks up the message basically where Jesus left off, right? He takes it into a whole other perspective, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what so much of that Christianity, which was really Paul informed that, but Jesus' teachings got put into an institutional religion now, the Catholic Church, in that way, that was formed, and that they saw the nomadic tribes as heathens and people where, that's why if they would have truly carried the teaching of Jesus, they would have gone and valued those people. But because they saw there's a disconnect, I think that's why God brought Muhammad to go reach all those who were worshiping sun gods and all different ones, and saying, there's one God. That it wasn't that, Muhammad was coming to replace Jesus, but in some ways, I think, to continue on that message, to reach.
Exactly. And it's kind of marvelous the way that worked out, and I can't, one of the biggest things that Christians try to do is invalidate anything that Muhammad said. but a lot of it was just regurgitated from what Jesus had talked about.
And, and what Jesus was saying was that he was Jewish, and it was the core teachings that was of Moses and Abraham that was on. Jesus, I don't think, was trying to create a new religion. He was trying to help reform, that which was at that time, there was a political issue with Rome and Caiaphas, one of the religious leaders who was in cahoots, no different than at different times. And so I really see all through the, generations, we see these, that God uses these great wisdom teachers to not trying to create new religions, but just trying to help people reform and understand.
Yeah. I saw a T-shirt one time. This was beautiful. It had a picture of what people think Jesus looks like. And it said on it, he had this disgusted look on his face, and it said, "That's not what I said."
When you were there in the Marines, and our world understands kind of strength kind of through that lens, but how have you now understood strength differently now?
That's a great question. I've never been asked that, but strength is something that it's not about might. Strength doesn't come from muscles. A lot of people, we go to the gym, we try to get big, try to look good, aesthetics and all that. But that's not strength. That's superficial. True strength is in the person's character. But what I had learned through Islam was the whole religion centered around character and character building.
Yes.
And I didn't get that from any other. I'm not saying that Christianity doesn't have that aspect or Judaism doesn't have that aspect. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I didn't get that from Christianity. So.
Right. And I think that's why all these different faith traditions are important, because we hear things differently. We connect for you. It connected for you at that time and place. And yes, I think that for those, the teachings of Jesus are there about character. And that's what I really love about that. They are similar, but, they reach different people where they are. And God uses these great teachers for our own lives. How are you different today? And here we go. This is 180 degrees. But how are you different today than you were, that Marine back then?
Well, so I had blinders on. I had tunnel vision. I didn't see what was around me. I saw what I was trained to see. I took the blinders off, and I found out that there's a whole human society out there that is not all bad. That we want to make things right. We want to do better. My New Year's New Year's statement every year, I put it on Facebook. Let's make this year a year that we do better. Right? It's every year I put that on there. And that's just it. With the drive that I learned in the military, right? All that motivation and all that mission success. And I turned it into something. I turned it into getting people to understand, not getting people to become Muslim, but getting people to understand and have empathy and understand that we are all the same, but we are all different.
And boy, that's in some way we go, oh yeah, that's true, and yet it's so hard in some ways to really embrace, isn't it?
Well, because here we are, as we say in Arabic, the dunya, which is this world, right? We're all about this world. Okay, as a society, we are all about this world. We want the prettier wife or husband. We want the bigger paying job. We want the bigger house, the honor roll students and all of that. That's what we strive for, and that's what we're focused on. When, even though of course, yeah, you want to live comfortably. I get that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But our focus needs to be on what we do, because I believe come Judgment Day, one of the most important questions that we're going to be asked: what did you do?
And also, I love in your story that there's redemption, that there is a sense that, you and I talked one time when we were at an event together, and you couldn't watch the film because you were feeling shame and guilt about who you were back then and some of that. And, what I was even trying to say to you then is, we all carry some shame and guilt of things in our lives.
Sure.
And that's the power of God's love, isn't it? That says you are not all of who you were in your past, and you don't need to stay there, and let God do something more in your life.
Right.
And I love that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, I still struggle with personal forgiveness. I have such a hard time with that, because I just can't. I can't. But like baptism in Islam, we take a declaration of faith. It's called a shahada, and we declare ourselves Muslim under one God and the final prophet, right? At that point, just like baptism, right, your sins are washed away. You start anew, clean slate, all right? And I believe that God has forgiven me. I believe that. And that's what's important. But personal forgiveness, nah. I've done some very bad things. And what made it bad was that I enjoyed it. And that was a sickness. That's how I look at it. That's not right, man. It's there's the old adage, right? Well, you did what you had to do. It's you or them. Now, there's a lot of truth to that. I'll give you that. There is a lot of truth to that. I took it a step further and did not get in trouble. So
I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing that with us. It's something that is a real gift that I think you bring in your story, that I hope touches other parts. And, I pray for you, for your finding forgiveness. We all, I think, have that journey of forgiving ourselves, but I do believe God wants us to, and I pray that you will find that. As we're kind of wrapping this up now, you talked about this organization that you created, and tell me just a little more about that.
It's all about believing in a higher power. And here's the important thing, the most important thing, that's believing in yourself. Mm-hmm. Because as a creationalist, which Christians, Jews, Muslims, we're all creationalists, right? We believe we were created by a creator. And knowing what I know about God from different religions, about this God, he don't make trash, right? I mean, he just don't. What are you going to do with that? You are more powerful than you could ever understand. And that's the thing. We need to find our why. Now, it might take us our whole life to figure that out. It took over half of mine. But now I feel that because of what I went through, I have this duty, this responsibility to try to get other people to think differently before they do the things that I was going to do. Yeah. And it's not just against Muslims, it's everybody. Jewish people here recently have been going through all kinds of struggles and strife, right? because people are hating on them because of Palestine, which that's not Judaism, that's Zionism. There's a total difference in that, right? It's like equating the Taliban with Islam. You can't. It's apples and oranges, right? You can't do that. It's the same thing in Israel. So, but we need to learn to understand one another, because one of the most prolific passages that I saw or that I read in the Quran was that God created us from one man, one woman, to work together and get to know each other, to get to know one another. And that was very prolific to me, because that's our job. That's our duty. How often do we do that? We stay to ourselves. We stay in our own cliques, right? We don't venture out. Why? Because it's not safe. We don't feel safe. It's okay.
Wow.
It's that good trouble. That good trouble. Good trouble's okay. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has just been a rich and wonderful conversation. And I appreciate your heart and the work you're doing. And I thank you for listening, and for you who are here. If you want to be a part of these continuing conversations, or also I invite you, if you want to, I have Whispers of the Sacred Heart that are kind of a 4-minute devotional on a weekly basis that you can also engage and listen to. And if you'd like to subscribe for future conversations, please do. Thank you again. May you open your heart and your mind and be kind to one another.